Let's go. Game 1, NBA Finals. It's here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's stop wasting time. It's a Thursday live stream. Green with Envy. Game 1 preview. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into the Game 1 NBA Finals preview. It is our Thursday live stream. You know how we do it every single Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. Green with Envy, here to give you the goods. Please come on in, get settled, get in the chat. It's the pregame jitters time. We're a few hours here before tip-off at TD Garden. If you're anything like me, it's all you've been thinking about all day. So I'm excited to welcome in here my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. Dude, we made it. It's game 1, NBA Finals. How you feeling?
It's been 10 days since the Celtics played. I got to the point where I was consuming. I felt like I had consumed everything that I could, and I was almost getting sick of content. Where I was like, I just need the freaking game to get here because I don't even know what to do with myself at this point.
Over the last 3 days, 2 or 3 days, I've started and stopped 2 or 3 different previews. I started looking into just to try to find some other podcasts I don't normally listen to, just because I was it was one of those things where I felt like I wanted more, but as it starts, I've heard every angle. We've talked about it. I've listened to it. Let's just play the fucking games. I just want these games to start. And so now we're finally here. I know when we last left the preview that we had, and appreciate everybody that's joining us. Get some questions in, drop them in the chat here. We'll try to get to those here in just a minute. You know, the biggest development since the last time that you and I talked on the podcast was we assume Kristaps Porzingis is playing, but we didn't know definitively whether or not that was going to happen. He's officially active here for game 1. And I know when we were doing our predictions with S, part of your prediction was basically no KP, it goes 6. With KP, it goes 5. So before we start getting into a little bit deeper here of what Kristaps' return means, now that you've had more days to sit there and stew and think about it and hear all the different angles, now that we know KP is active for game 1, do you feel Celtics in 5? Is that what you're still riding with?
No, I need to see him play, man. I need to see KP healthy on the court. I mean, he was being pretty coy and evasive with his answers about where his health actually is. Didn't commit to his cardio being in the right place, didn't commit to his game being in the right place. So it's definitely a little worrisome. I don't know if he's just trying to throw the Mavs off the scent that he's going to be super healthy. But like I said, with S, man, all we need out of KP, in my opinion, is 20 to 25 minutes.
Right.
It would be ideal to get him for 35 and to have him playing crunch time and, catching lobs and protecting the rim. But we really just need him to do more than what Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman did in the last couple of rounds, because we got absolutely nothing out of those guys. And it just came down to Al Horford or bust, right? And everyone's just screaming for Tatum at the 5 and O'Shea Brissett minutes. And we know that that's not the ideal scenario for the Celtics. So if you can get, 48 minutes between Horford and Porzingis, then I'm perfectly happy with that. And I think that in itself will be enough to give the Celtics an extra edge.
Yeah, and so we got a comment here from our guy Jacob. Do y'all think KP makes it through the whole series? Do we think he's fully healthy? And this is kind of going to exactly what you said, Greg. We got to see it, right? It's all good. It's not even all good because it's a little ambiguous, a little mysterious as to whether or not it is all good based on some of the answers that we've gotten to him being active. And, this is where all this time off has been great because you get that extra time. But there's, and of course, you're going to take a series win 4-0. You're going to take that every time. But there's a little bit that's would have been nice if we got just 20 minutes of just seeing what Kristaps Porzingis looked like in that Pacers series. But then again, there was still going to be 8 days off versus 10 days off or whatever. So it's still, I don't know how much it would have told you, or maybe, worst case scenario, KP gets hurt in that one game and then you don't even get those extra days of rest or meaningless at that point. So I think you're right. I think it really just comes down to we got to see it on the court. So I know that kind of gets me to another point that I wanted to ask you is what to you are going to be the signs that you're looking for that tell you, okay, I think KP's healthy or he's, 80%, 90%, like we talked about, a guy that can be on the court, but not just on the court, but meaningfully on the court, even if it's not 100% KP. What are the signs that you're going to look for that tell you, that indicate that for you?
I mean, besides the obvious how well he's moving, I would say how he deals with physicality. So anytime there's another big coming in, because when you have a lower leg injury, you don't want to bang with people, right? So I
Right.
think KP, if he's willing to bang early in the game, that would be something that stands out to me that he's at least not thinking about it. Obviously, his ability to get vertical, are we going to throw him a lob early to test it? Are we going to try and ease him back into the action? The Celtics kind of like to throw guys back into the fire over the last couple of years. That's kind of things that stand out to me is like guys coming back from injury, like Marcus Smart just diving on the floor with a broken thumb, like that classic play. But that I think it's going to be pretty obvious. I think even the average fan would be able to watch KP and say, "Oh, he's right" or "He's not right."
Right. And especially for a guy of that size, right? Like it's like to your point, that's kind of the obvious part of it, right? There's no really hiding whether or not he's moving well at that size. It's gonna be very apparent. And something you just mentioned is the Celtics kind of trying to get him back in the mix right away. I was just thinking maybe that's a good bet. Maybe KP first basket. Maybe that's a good bet for those of you out there tonight to maybe look into. Maybe they try to get KP an open three to kind of start the game. But it hasn't been announced yet, so I'm still looking at it here on Twitter, just kind of refreshing. I don't believe the official starting lineups have been announced. I would assume that he is going to start. But Greg, I know we were in a text message thread before this was announced, and you said that you thought actually maybe bring him off the bench might be the right way. I was on the other side of the coin where if he's healthy, start him. That's been the game plan all year. Do you still feel like maybe bringing him off the bench is the right play, or even if they start him, what's the case for bringing him off the bench?
I think the case for bringing him off the bench is actually a matchup case, because Lively comes off the bench for the Mavs, and I think that KP is a worse matchup for Lively than Horford is. So I think Horford can match up pretty well with Gafford.
Hmm.
I think KP obviously would blow Gafford out of the water. Lively's clearly the better player between the two of
Yeah.
those guys, but I think matching one of the reasons why Lively has been so effective is he's playing against bench units. So I would like to see maybe that being considered, KP coming off the bench to match Lively. But then you have to think about, Lively's activity, and do you want KP in his first
Right.
game back having to deal with this 20-year-old kid that's just like running around? I mean, that dude is the most energetic big man I've seen since I don't even know who, man.
Well, that's also the other part about this, right? Like, who do you think KP guards? Because I don't know that they would necessarily put him on Lively. My guess is that they might want to actually put him on maybe Derek Jones Jr. Right?
Mhm.
Let's say
Yeah.
let's say KP starting. Like that would be probably my guess because most likely he's going to be in the corner. Either way, whoever Porzingis is guarding, they're probably going. Luka's going to try to put him in the action, right? Like
Right. Right.
that's probably the first thing that we're going to assume. But at least with Lively, I think there's a chance that maybe that's Tatum's assignment. I don't know. Like, who do you think is the best place, or where is the best place to put KP on defense? And let's just use for now. Let's assume that he's with that starting unit that we've seen all season, and it's going to be the
Mhm.
Mavs starting unit. Who do you think should be that matchup?
I think you're hit the nail on the head when you say Derek Jones Jr. just because of his role within the offense. He stands in the corner for most of the time. The issue with that is transition and KP being able to keep up with him in transition because Luka loves hit ahead passes and alley oops to Jones in transition. But I think that in a set defense, that makes the most sense because then you can hide him on the baseline. It makes it a little bit easier for him to come over and take away a rolling big and just be large at the rim. And you
Hmm.
force Derek Jones to be, a make or miss guy. And that's probably the guy you want to bet on. PJ is more likely to be up into the action. Like they would just throw Gafford into the dunker spot and have PJ come set the screen if he guards PJ, right? Derek Jones
Right.
is not going to be a guy that they're going to bring up as willingly into those actions. But they could go double drag, and have Jones be the second screener so that KP ends up on him. So there's different ways that they could get around it. But that's kind of my thoughts. How about you?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I think that's part of the chess match, right? This is going to be game one. This is where sometimes I think game ones can get a little ugly at times, right? Because you're not sure whatever you start with, that you have a counter already that you've been planning for 10 days that you've been planning to throw out. But it's okay. How long do we let our initial game plan ride until, whether you're the Mavs on offense or the Celtics on defense, until we make an adjustment? And that's going to be, I think, the most interesting part of this series is how many counters. And this is partially why I feel very confident. I think the Celtics are going to have more counters schematically to
Mhm.
whatever the Mavericks do versus what the Mavericks can really adjust, other than just, it's just going to, like we said, a lot of it's going to ride on what's Luka. Luka in every capacity is going to dictate to a degree what the Mavericks ceiling is, how much he holds up on defense and how special he is on offense. Oh, that's going to be a major component. Whereas for the Celtics, okay, this isn't working. We can, play more double bigs. We can do less double bigs. We can,
Mhm.
switch up kind of our rotations. I think we can do different matchups to force them to, as you said, they're less willing to put Derek Jones likely into that screen action, but we can force them to do that depending on the way that we play. So I think there's going to be an interesting amount of adjustments and see what initially the game plan is, and then to
Mhm.
see how quickly, either tonight or later in the series, that some of those adjustments are made.
I want to
While
I
we're on
want to
Cade,
pause you. I want to pause you
go
real
ahead.
quick because I got a comment from Connor Smith here in the chat. You mentioned Luca. You mentioned adjustments. Connor's question is: do you think JB starts on Luca, or do you think it's one of the guards? The national media seems to be split on it. So I'll take that first. I think that, if you caught our preview pod with S, one of the things that I mentioned was the two-way load, right, that you're putting on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. When you have two non-creators on the other team, I think early on in the game, especially when the Mavs are just going to be hunting switches so that they can get whoever they want onto Luka, I think it makes the most sense just to have the Jays use as much of their energy on the offensive side of the ball.
Mhm.
And you start with your best defender that you got in the offseason for these moments in Drew Holiday, even though he's a little bit undersized. Personally, that's the way I would go. But I would not be surprised if Jaylen Brown just tells Joe Mazzulla and tells the rest of the team that he's guarding Luka Doncic, because Drew Holiday is also a really good help defender, probably definitely a better help defender than Jaylen Brown is. So I think Drew could very easily guard a PJ Washington or guard a big man like Daniel Gafford. Like, Daniel Gafford's not going to be able to really expose Drew too much. So you could go with Drew guarding Gafford. That way, if it's JB and Drew, they can very easily make that switch. But then, as I mentioned, the Mavs love going double drag. So with the double drag, they have the initial big man, like Gafford would set the first screen, and then the second guy is the guy that they
Mhm.
really want to get switched, and that's where you'd probably see a Jones or a Washington set that screen for Luka to get the second big onto him.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the thing: it's a group assignment, right? Like, this is going to be, I think, in the beauty of this being a group assignment from the Celtics point of view, is I think there's about 3.5 guys that the Celtics feel relatively comfortable matching up on Luka, and that's going to be the Jays, it's going to be Drew, and I gave Al a half just because he's big enough physically, and on the perimeter, like, Luka's going to feel extremely comfortable, but Al will get a contest, right? Like, Al should be able to get a contest, but
Al
Luka's
Sneaky is in your landing zone too, so he can make some people uncomfortable with the sprained ankle.
exactly. So that's why, like I said, it's not like we've seen Al get picked on at times, but for a big man who just turned 38 years old, happy belated to our guy Al, like, it's a pretty damn good job that he does as far as trying to handle a Darius Garland or a Luca who's gonna do slow down, slow you even further down, half speed, and then slow you down again. And you got to try to, keep up with that along with his basketball IQ. So there's 3.5 guys the Celtics feel relatively good about in the group assignment. I'm actually kind of expecting Jaylen to some of the reasons for some of the reasons that you mentioned to be the initial assignment on Luca. Just kind of, we've talked all season. JB is that, that tempo setter, that he sets the tone. He's the tone setter for this team. And so I think that's going to be whether it's him telling Joe that he wants it or it's Joe just saying this is what we're going to do to establish this. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be Jalen on Luka for 40 minutes, right? So even if he starts that way, you're going to mix in Drew, you're going to mix in Tatum, Horford's going to get in there at some point. To me, I think it's going to be, especially with all this time off. Let's try to set the tone and let's try to defend home court because we've talked about the Celtics home court record over the last 3 years is not great. Been better this postseason now with only 2 losses so far this postseason at home, but this is going to be game one. This is going to be a game that I think the Mavericks are going to have a good chance to steal. Is going to be this game right here tonight. All this time off, people are going to be kind of feeling it out. I would expect a little bit of rust. So maybe this is the time you have Jaylen Brown start that first quarter as just kind of that defensive menace trying to get under Luka's skin. Let's see how they react and see what happens, because then you're going to have to make, adjustments off of that. And that kind of goes into what's becoming a more popular, not necessarily narrative, but suggestion of, if you look at the Mavericks path to the finals, the most resistance they felt was against the Thunder in that second round, where they won 4-2. But if you look at the aggregate score, it was tied 436 to 436 in that. And the way that the Thunder approached it was, let's just play Luka straight up. And we're going to try to cut off everything else with Kyrie and try to cut down on, some of the lobs. And ultimately, Kyrie didn't have a great series in that second round. You talked about Cason Wallace being one of the primary defenders on him. And that's kind of maybe what you want to emulate in this series if you can. And then it was really came down to Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington being able to shoot 37 and 47% from three respectively to go along with what Luka was able to do one-on-one. And so I'm curious, do you think that could be a potential route to go, where you try to say, all right, we'll live with Luka one-on-one with Jalen, and it's going to be difficult to maintain this consistently, but do you think that is a potential way to approach the larger Luka problem at hand?
Well, it's interesting because you're saying they dealt with Luka one-on-one, which is true. Lou Dort was his primary matchup, and he does such a good job navigating screens and just being physical. But then you also said they lived with PJ Washington and Derek Jones getting open shots. And I got news for you, Will. They don't create their own shots. Luka Doncic creates all their shots for them, right? So just because they were playing Luka straight up, all that means is that they weren't double teaming Luka. That doesn't mean that they weren't showing multiple defenders in gaps to make Luka make those passes, right? So that's kind of, I think that narrative that playing Luka straight up, I don't really buy into it, because that's just not how NBA basketball is played. Like if you look at the way the Mavs play defense, for example, Gibson Piper, who's a great coach, breaks down the game really well, put together a nice thread yesterday on Twitter with all of the ways that the Mavs have made life difficult for teams like the Thunder, who were one of the best shooting teams throughout the league, have great slashers and SGA and Jalen Williams. And if you watch those clips, man, the Mavs are in just like, they're in man-to-man, but they're basically in a zone with all of
like
these
a
shifting zone where they're peel switching constantly. And they're basically playing boxes and elbows and just flying out to shooters. And that's the thing that's more interesting to me than, how are we defending Luka? It's how are we going to solve the Mavs defense? Because the more that I watched tape on the Mavs and how they were playing defense, I was like, dang, the Celtics are really going to have to lock in and make the extra pass. We have more talent than those other teams have. We have more shooting than those other teams have. But the Mavs look really, really good on defense, and Lively is a problem in the middle of the paint. Like nobody was able to really score against the Mavs because of Derek Lively. So that's going to be something the Celtics are really going to have to focus on. And we can't just say, let's attack the rim and don't be scared of him, because he's a real problem in there. So we're going to have to figure out ways to get him out of the paint. And it'll be interesting to see how we go about doing that.
Well, and that's where, this is where Porzingis is a massive difference between having him and not having him, right? Because now you're looking at potentially your top 6, 2 of which are going to be bigs that likely Lively is going to be on at least one of them, especially if they're both out there. He's going to be on at least one of them. And we've talked all season with Porzingis, he doesn't shoot from the corners, right? He shoots above the break and he shoots 3 to 4 feet behind the 3-point line. I think the stat earlier this year was like the longest distance on average shot attempts from three. It was like him, Tyrese Halliburton, Trae Young, and Steph Curry, right? Like those were like the top four as far as like distance shooting. And so with Porzingis, that's where it really changes the geometry of, what Lively's able to do and how much they're going to live with. And, using once again that kind of OKC series, like you mentioned, it's such a different animal when you look at what the Celtics possess versus, what them or even the Timberwolves do when, in that OKC series, Dort was shooting almost 7 threes a game. Holmgren's a rookie who was shooting, 4 or 5 threes a game. Kason Wallace, another rookie they were depending on to make shots. And now you replace that with Derek White, Drew Holiday, and the combination of Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis. But at the same time, that leaves it on, all right, is it just make or miss? And I don't think it's quite that simple. But, when I look at this, Greg, and I mentioned before, kind of the PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr. combo. And I think one of the keys that's going to really determine success here is going to be throughout the series, PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr., their 3-point attempts and makes versus Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. Like, I think if you look at their two stat lines, once we get to the end of the series, that's, I think, going to be a big indicator of which team won that particular game because they're going to be such big X factors. Look like you got a clip rolled up here for us.
Yeah, so this is our guy Fred commented. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Our guy Fred commented here that he could visualize what's happening because of LeBron's podcast, and that just made me think about just bringing up the visuals. I referenced Half Court Hoops, Gibson Piper's breakdown here. So if you just watch right now the way that the Mavs play defense, so when you say boxes and elbows, right, that just means that they have defenders on the elbows, they have defenders on the boxes, right? So that when you hear that phrase, that's what we mean here. So when you watch the way that they break it down here, they're just constantly passing off defenders, as you see him right here showing the peel switch. So Derek Lively takes Holmgren cutting to the basket. Luka peel switches back off. And they just play this almost zone, right? Where Derek Lively's just sitting in the middle of the zone and they're funneling everything to Lively and they're just super physical at all points. They're basically in a 2-3 zone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this breakdown and how consistent they were making these reads really stood out to me as, a real problem for the Celtics, because the Celtics haven't really had to work that hard to get buckets because the Pacers just played us straight up. The Cavs didn't have Jared Allen. The Miami Heat just had nothing for us. But if you just watch all this tape here, the switches are so they're so crisp, and everything ends with Lively contesting. Like Lively is everywhere on the court, and it kind of worries me a little bit when you think back to that Cavs series and how Tatum sort of struggled with Mobley, right?
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't really finish against Mobley. I'm a little bit concerned about how Tatum is going to deal with Derek Lively just constantly in the middle of the paint. And SGA, I mean, we've seen SGA just give everybody problems. And in all these clips here, it's just Derek Lively contesting. Derek Lively contested. Look, it's insane, dude. Just watch Derek Lively in all these plays. He just sits in the middle of the paint.
And he gets above the free throw line and recovers in some of these clips too.
Dude, he's really impressive.
Yeah, Derek Lively is going to be a problem, man. That is definitely one of the guys this is why I asked that question with when we had S on the other day for the preview. Who's the Mavericks' third best player? I think it might be this rookie, right? Like, I think he's probably the answer to that question behind Luka and Kyrie. So, Greg, as you were watching some of these clips here that we're showing the Mavericks have, and this is once again where it lulls you into a false sense of security. Like, other than Lively, who's a rookie, right? Who's still, a little bit raw, but developing at a very quick pace. You talked about how they've brought him along this season, and who he was at the beginning of the year to who he is now is a very different person. But it's not as if this team is loaded with lockdown defenders, but it's their team defense being together, connective tissue, like locked together on a string, whatever, all those different terms that you can put together. What do you think is the counter that the Celtics throw at them to try to beat them after what you've seen?
Well, I mean, spacing is the biggest thing. Like in a lot of these clips, the teams aren't necessarily in a full 5-out. Like this one here, they're basically in 5-out with a high pick and roll, right? But then they're always, when you go pick and roll, you always end up with somebody occupying the baseline in the dunker spot. And I think like our spacing and our ability to play 5-out is going to be a difference. I don't know that going pick and roll really makes sense against the way that they play, because they're always going to have somebody taking away the middle, and they're so
Mhm.
good at just showing bodies anytime there's a guy rolling down the middle, and it's oftentimes Derek Lively who's taking that away. So you can't have anybody, in my opinion, just sitting in the dunker spot, and I don't think it makes a ton of sense to go with a lot of pick and roll. So I think the Celtics are going to have to really work on moving the ball and trying to shoot gaps. But even shooting gaps, like there's always a gap defender there. They help. They are in help, ready to recover. That was one of my favorite phrases when I was a coach, was just being in help, ready to recover. And that's what we see out of the Mavs and like all of these clips. All their defenders are constantly in help, ready to recover, and they fly out to shooters. I think the Celtics have the shooters to be able to make them pay for being a little bit overzealous with their help. But I was really impressed when I watched the tape on the Mavs, and shout out to at Half Court Hoops for that breakdown, because it was really eye opening and it made me
Mhm.
rethink how easy I thought this series was going to be. Because you watch tape of like the Pacers, and the Pacers play defense, they freaking suck on defense compared to what we just watched. Like they had no strategy. It was pick up full court and like, let's just try and increase the tempo of the game.
That
No,
was the
don't
worst
worry
pickup
if
full
Obi
court
Toppin is
strategy.
guarding 94 feet. Don't worry about that. That's our strategy. It just didn't make any sense. So the Mavs are a serious team that wants to win this finals.
Yeah, that OB top and picking up Peyton Pritchard 94 feet was the first clip that jumped into my head. Just like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't understand. Just pick up a man randomly and wildly was kind of the Pacers strategy. So, yeah, I'm really excited for this series. I think while I do still feel confident, and it's kind of growing my confidence the more that we wait for this series to begin, that I think Celtics in 6 is still the right call. I think this is going to be a fantastic series. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's going to be a lot of counters going back and forth, and there's a lot of greatness that's involved in this series, from high level shot making to, new guys like Derek Lively who are going to be able to kind of make their impact. You get KP in the finals for the first time. So, I think this is a fun one here. We got from our guy, I think this is from, let's see, who was it here? We got it from Jacob here. Who's going to be the first to get teed up arguing with the refs? Luka or Tatum? This is a pretty good one here. I think I have my answer. Who do you think it is, Greg?
It's Luka. Come on.
Yeah, I think it's Luka too. Luka is going to be public enemy number one. Like, it's kind of interesting because I think the Kyrie Irving hate in Boston was at a point that it was starting to die down. Now it's the finals, so of course it's ramped back up a little bit here because we're going to have Kyrie for a full 2 weeks here, 2.5 weeks, whatever it is. But there's no doubt in my mind by the end of this series, Luka is going to be far more hated than Kyrie Irving, unless Kyrie goes back to doing, his fan interactions with flipping everybody off and doing the crying thing. Then Kyrie's going to maintain the title. But other than that, Luka will easily, I think, easily surpass Kyrie as the most hated man in Boston by the end of the series.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Luka's a big baby.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to see what the crowd interaction is like with Luka. We're now just a couple hours away here from tip off. Greg, what else anything else that you're looking forward to? I mean, we've touched on this a
I'm looking
bunch. We
forward to
know
watching basketball, Will.
that's very true. That's very true. Here we got one more question in the chat here. Let's get this in here. How worried, if at all, are you about Peyton Pritchard minutes? I'll be honest. I'm not super worried in the fact that I think he'll probably get 10 to 12
He'll
minutes in the
play when
first couple of
Luka's not
games.
playing.
Yeah, he'll get a few minutes in the first couple of games, and then the more that Luka starts playing 45, 46 minutes, I think there's a chance by the end of the series we don't see Peyton at all. Like I really think that's a potentially likely scenario. So if you're Peyton Pritchard, man, you better make an impact in these these first 2-3 games when you're going to get a chance to be out there, because if they start going with a lineup that just doesn't allow for you to be out there, I think Missoula is going to cut it down to 6 or 7, and it's probably going to be the main 6. Hauser has enough size, and you'll probably give him at least a shot in every game to make a couple threes and get hot. It gives you that extra spacing when you're trying to draw Gafford and Lively out so that they can't really hide on anybody. But yeah, I think that's probably Peyton Pritchard's destiny. Is it a Brissett series? Do you think we see Brissett at all?
No, no, we don't see Brissett. I think we see a, a good amount of Sam Hauser. I would expect Sam to be able to hang in this series. I think he does a decent job guarding Luka. I think if we see anybody from the stable of bigs, I would imagine it would be Cornette, just because he's so big around the rim. But if we decide that we can't sit and drop, then it'll be Tillman. But I don't think we'll see Brissett. I think we've seen the last of O'Shea Brissett. I don't think it makes any sense to play him against Derek Lively or Gafford. I get
So interesting.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say interesting on the Luke and Tillman part, just because rewatching the March 1st game, which a little bit of fool's gold because Derek Jones and Daniel Gafford barely play in that game. It's just a very different Mavs team in that game than what we've seen this postseason. But it was one of the few games where I think Tillman actually looked like he belonged. Right, it felt like it wasn't a game where I think it was like overwhelming. Like, yes, this is some big revelation that we got from Tillman, but it was a really solid Tillman performance. So, I was kind of wondering a little bit as they got to figure out how to balance KP's minutes in his return and what that looks like. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got a pretty small sample size of Tillman here in game one. Maybe they go Luke, maybe they stick with Luke. I don't know, but I just thought it was
Lively's so
Tillman,
big though, man. I think because Lively's a legit 7-footer. I think that's why you see Luke first, because Lively can be such an issue. And I think Luke, just sheer size, you have to go with that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to look forward to tonight. One thing I did want to show, Will, is that little video essay that our guy Mark put together that I did the narration for. So I want to play that. We don't have to call this the end of the stream. We can talk about it, shoot the shit, hang out with people if they got questions. But I want to just play this quick little 2-minute video here, and then we'll wrap the stream up. When the Celtics won in 2008, I was 18, just out of high school. I watched the clinching game in a packed room full of people I would never speak to in any meaningful way again. But I didn't know that then. The whole world was in front of me, and the Celtics were champions of that world. And in the words of a former Celtic, anything was possible. I didn't realize that time moved so quickly. That next win never came. Everyone knows the story. The seas got close a few times, but no Auerbach cigars. There have been longer droughts, but I spent most of the years between 86 and 08 either having not been born yet or as a child. When the Celtics were bad, it didn't really matter. You could go get a discounted jersey at Marshall's and call it even. Now, I'm older. I've got a job and bills and aches and parts of my body that I never thought about before. There are happy things too. I mean, I'm getting married this fall. The version of me that saw Banner 17 seems distant, amorphous, unrelatable. He wanted the Celtics to win. I need them to. People will warn you about the dangers of investing too much of your emotions into a sports team. And they're probably right to do so. I mean, why would you love something that doesn't love you back? Well, I don't look at it that way. This is our community. These are our shared dreams. We care as teenagers, and we care at 34, and if all goes well, we'll care at 80. Celtics forever. Banner 18. Woo!
Let's go. Well done. Well done. That video is getting some love today. Shout out to our guy Mark, who put that together, and the narrator, of course, one and only Greg Manakis.
That was, did you know, two takes, baby. Two takes.
It was good, man. Dude, honestly, perfectly timed. It was well done. Did you guys come up with this together? Because I had no idea this was happening. I didn't know. You just sent me this out of the blue today. I had no idea what this.
Yeah, no. Mark texted me. He said, "Hey, bro, do you have like a sports blog or anything that you can post this essay that I did?" And I said, "Well, we have a podcast, Mark. You know that." So I was like, "Why don't you put together?" Like I explained to him like the concept of video essay. And I said, put together some video clips, and now go ahead and I'll do the narration and produce it for you. So that's how it happened, man. Yeah, I got crazy love on TikTok today. It was,
love it. I honestly, I forget that we even have a TikTok. So follow us on TikTok, guys. Greg is solely in charge of our TikTok, so I forget that it's out there. So is it just at Green MB Pod on TikTok as well?
I don't fucking know, dude. I, I would
Clearly,
imagine.
we're heavily invested into our content on TikTok. It's also on our Instagram as well. So at Green MB Pod, we posted on Twitter. So basically, if you follow us anywhere on social media, you should have seen this today. But that shit was hype, man. That shit was
Super
so
hype.
well
Shout
done.
out to my guy David Price, my producer for Black Sheep Optimist. We have so many beats that we've talked about using and putting into songs that I just use and repurpose for the podcast. I was like, "Hey, Dave, use another one of your sick beats, dude." So I made sure to tag him in it today because that's one of my favorite ones. I've always wanted to make a song out of that, but today I was just like, you know what? Let's use this because the moment he sent me that video, I remembered this beat because Dave labels all of his beats like deep, serious EDM beat, like hype,
Okay.
spacey, fire beat.
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, okay, there's one that's called Deep Beat. So I just typed that into my computer, found it, it worked perfectly. And
Dude,
then what I
I love
did,
it.
so the first time I recorded it, I didn't record it with the video playing. So I just
Mhm.
did just recorded it into Logic, and then I was like, you know what? I need the music playing, I need the video playing. So then the take you heard was me recording it to the music into the video, which is why I think it came out so well.
Yeah, it was fucking awesome. It was, like I said, I was shocked when I got this message, just no context to it. And I was like, what am I watching here? What is this? This is awesome. And then, at the end, obviously, I kind of figured it out. But yeah, I love the collab. Guys, if you have stuff that you want to send us, maybe it makes it on the show, maybe it makes it onto our social media. Just send us stuff. We are happy to go through it. But yeah, what up, Ben? How we doing, man?
Shout out to our
Shout
guy
out to
Ben
our friend
Vallis, first to the
first to
floor.
the
Ben,
floor.
Ben, what's your prediction tonight?
Actually, that's a good call. While we wait for Ben in the chat, what's your prediction for tonight, Greg? Let's go there.
I had a conversation at lunch with my coworkers today. Everybody was obviously very hyped for the finals. Being down here in Austin, Texas, we got some Mavs fans in the office, and I said Celtics 111, Mavs 106. How about you?
Ooh, we got blowout C's win from Ben. I love it, Ben. I love it. I think this game is going to be a little bit ugly, a little bit lower scoring. I'm going to go with Celtics 105, Mavs 97. I think we're gonna. I think
Celtics
it's. I
105.
think. I
Okay.
think it's gonna be a relatively close game. I think it's just gonna be. It's gonna be a feel out game. It's gonna. We've talked a lot about styles make fights. This is gonna feel like a boxing match. This is gonna feel like it's kind of going back and forth, where it's like, oh, the Celtics figured something out. Oh, the Mavs figured something out. And ultimately, I think the Celtics will come away with this win. A little bit more worried for Sunday. I think game 2, the issues that we saw in previous series, because I think it leaves 1-1 somehow from Boston. I will say that. I think that
I
we're
did say I
leaving.
did say earlier in the postseason, right? I said the reason why we're losing these game twos is because in the finals we're going to lose game 2 and we're going to have to bounce back from a game 2 loss, and it was just preparation. But
It's all
who
prep
knows,
work.
man? Who knows? I have a question for you though, Will.
Yeah.
So we're doing a post game pod tonight, right? We're doing a live
Yep.
stream.
We'll be
Okay,
we'll be here, guys, right after the game, probably about 5-10 minutes after the game ends. Come join us here. We'll be on YouTube and we'll be on Twitter.
cool. Are you? I know I see you're sipping. What is that? Sparkling water?
Yeah, a little
Are you going to
rambler.
be imbibing any alcohol tonight?
Honestly, yes. I 100. I like
So okay,
after
so same. So with the live stream is going to be us drunk,
it
which
will
is
be
going to be
fun.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was thinking about it earlier, and I've been so excited for this just to have this here. I'm like, you know what? I usually don't like to drink if we're going to, be doing a podcast afterwards.
No, what I can't do. I
I'm gonna
cannot.
need like my nerves, like my nerves started off at like a high today, and I've kind of like calmed myself down throughout the day. But now as we're doing this, and I know once we get off this, I'm just gonna be pacing like around my house,
Yeah.
just what do I do? So I've already planned it out. Like I'm gonna go to the store, grab a 6-pack. I'm gonna get something for dinner for me and the wifey, and then we'll kind of go from there. But like I need stuff to do to occupy myself for the next couple of hours until game time. Until game time.
Jake, my guy Jacob, already 3 shots in. I freaking love it, dude. Ben says gonna need a liver transplant if we win the chip, a lobotomy if we lose. Definitely, Jacob. Yes, with the pregame. Gotta get
I
that
like it.
right. No,
I like it.
I love it.
I
I
love it.
love it, man. I'm
This is
sipping
great.
whiskey tonight, Will. I'm sipping whiskey. So
Okay,
I might not
we'll
even make
see.
any sense. My
Well,
face
listen,
is definitely gonna be flush.
I'm going with beer so that I can still control the ship a little bit when we get
Oh yeah.
when we get to the
I'm
live
not gonna be
stream. Live stream,
coherent.
so
So
I'll help it. Yeah, I'll make sure that I navigate us when we get to the post game. But another quick announcement here, just for anybody listening, that if you're going to be trying to make the trip to Dallas officially, your boy's gonna be there for Game 4. So if you guys are gonna be there, shoot me a message. Would love to meet up with anybody. Have a drink before the game, maybe celebrate or commiserate afterwards. Hopefully, celebrate, obviously. So, if anyone's in the Texas area, if you're going to be in Dallas for the games next weekend, let me know. But it's here, man.
dude, I'm so
It's game
jealous.
1.
I'm so
I know
jealous.
I'm not,
Like
and
I
I'm
know
not trying to rub it in because I get it. But
every time you got to make me feel bad that I can't go because I have to be a supportive partner, and my fiance is going to be
yeah, dude, listen,
2 weeks out from the baby.
I already told my fiance Lorena, I was like, listen, it was kind of like a scene from The Town where, like, I'm gonna buy some tickets, but you can never ask me about it. Can't ask me how much they cost. Can't ask about who I'm going with. I just need you to know that it's happening.
I love that. I love that. I'm very jealous. You're gonna have a great time. I hope you get to
Yeah,
meet up with Drew. I hope you get to meet up with Kari and have some drinks with some
we'll
Celtics
see.
fans, man.
Anybody that's gonna be there, let us know. DM me, hit us up on CelticsNoise@gmail.com. That's our email address. Feel free to go ahead and send us a note out there as well. But everybody, go get what you need. Go get your libations lined up. Jacob, pace yourself. Everyone else out there, hope you guys are set to enjoy finally what should be a great night of basketball. NBA Finals, Game 1, Celtics Mavericks. Let's get you guys set up with some Black Sheep Optimists. Roll into the night, and we will be back post game, 5 to 10 minutes after the conclusion of Game 1. Come join us, YouTube, Twitter. We'll be feeling ourselves, hopefully, and hopefully we're celebrating. If not, we're trying to figure out where we go from here. So we'll see you guys after the game. Peace.
It feels like summer, baby. Oh, mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. So fly, the sky will kiss you. Lips so smooth and miss your issues. Oh, mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. Oh, my, I'm slipping into white lies and time to miss you. Now you're 3 shots deep that you chase with the Croy. You're looking at